Final Stop Brazil. Book 2, Life After Hell, Chapter 51. Chaotic Registrar's Office. The Street Boy. Now it was time I put my foot down on the accelerator. First, I asked Tanya to talk to her friend in the register office. Tanya did not seem particularly enthusiastic, and even though she knew I was waiting desperately for information, I stood in front of a dark house. Her cell phone was off. Strange. But I didn't want to lose more time and immediately took a bus to speak to Fabiano. He wasn't at home either, so I left a message for him with Lucia, but I had to call him anyway. The next day I went again to see Tanya, but her information was quite poor. I almost had the impression that she did not speak to her friend. I realized long ago that I could rely only on myself. With Fabiano, I agreed to meet on Wednesday in front of the register office in Lauro de Freitas. What a mess. Lucia forgot to send her auxiliary from the restaurant there to take the place in the queue for us until we replaced him. Although I had offered before to be there already by 6 in the morning and wait there until the doors opened, but Fabiano insisted that this was not necessary because his mother would send her assistant. Thus I found myself at the end of a queue reaching down the entire street. At this rate our turn will be by 5 o'clock this afternoon, if at all, I thought to myself. I couldn't reach Fabiano on the phone, so I hurried over to the restaurant and asked Lucia to send him immediately to the Cattorio as soon as he appeared. Shortly after 8, he arrived, however, had to copy his documents yet. Meanwhile, the doors opened and the securities began to distribute the waiting numbers. We were lucky. The only time that day. No waiting numbers for couples wanting to get married. But even here was a long queue at the door. We waited, at first 1, then 2 hours. The registrar, on duty, did not appear, and Fabiano was already pretty much at the end of his patience. It was not easy to keep him happy. Bad-tempered, he growled, "That alone will forever remind me never to marry again." Finally, the chief of the registry office came and served the people himself. The queue came into movement, but not for long, because now the computer system crashed. Nothing moved anymore. To distract myself, I let my experience from the previous day pass my mind as a review, which had made me very thoughtful, and slowly but surely made a decision growing inside me. As usual, I took the bus after work in the direction to Itinga. A boy sat down on the steps of entering directly at the door, his head on his arms, so I could not see his face. Where he sat, it was very dangerous, for as soon as the door of the bus opened, he could have fallen out easily, since the doors mostly opened before the bus stopped and closed after the bus was in motion again. I looked around the mostly very tired passengers. The majority were black people, auxiliary workers, help workers doing hard jobs for small money. The black women working as maids for the white middle and upper class families. Yes, here in Bahia, it is in this respect still the same as it was 200 years ago. Few blacks have the chance to go to college to get a solid work or study at all. For this reason, the crime rate is much higher in the black population than in the white. Most of the blacks have absolutely no perspective and no support by the government. It was almost ironic when I saw the big posters that were everywhere to be seen here in Bahia. Racism? Not here. Of course, not officially, but where is the equality? Equal opportunities for each and every one. Dear President, much remains to be done yet. Most passengers were asleep from fatigue and the others not interested. "Hey, something wrong with you? Do you feel sick?" I asked the boy finally. He looked up, and I looked into a pretty but sad face, which made me automatically remember this boy back in Fortaleza, the same sad and hopeless look. "I'm just tired, was on the beach, and want to go home now," he replied. "But not like this. Get up. It's far too dangerous, sitting there at the door." "I have no money for the bus fare," he told me. "In Salvador, you enter the bus at the back, not at the front. Pay the fare to the cobrador, and after that you may pass the rotational entrance to the seats. Subsequently, you come out of the bus at the front, the actual entrance, anywhere else. In Salvador, you'll find everything a little different." With my meager salary, I had to give away nothing, but I thought no longer at this moment, and paid the fare for him. Briefly, the boy thanked me and disappeared through the crowd of standing passengers to the front of the bus. But this didn't give me no peace of mind. This boy, with his dirty and tattered clothes, didn't give the impression as if he had a nice day on the beach behind him and would now go back to his comfortable home. I found him, asked if he was really going home, if he lived with his parents, if he went to school. He gave me very conflicting answers, and I knew that he lied to me. Suddenly, he complained that he had a headache and was hungry. "Where do you have to come off the bus?" "São Cristóvão. Not the best area, sometimes very dangerous." "Okay, I get off with you and buy you a pastel there, okay?" The pastry vendor pointed at the boy and said despairingly, "Forget this boy, this one lives on the street." This statement alone infuriated me. So what? Then someone has to help him. An elderly woman with a confectionery stand right next to the pastel vendor was interfering now. "He only gets you into trouble. These brats steal to pay for their drugs." The boy responded aggressively to those accusations, so I had to slow him. "Where will you go now?" When I asked, I only got a shrug. He sat down again where it was dangerous, at the curb, where buses and cars were passing dangerously close. Energetically, I asked him to get up there immediately and told him to look me in the eyes when speaking to me. "And show respect when you talk to older people. It doesn't work like that. You cannot yell at the old lady there. And now, tell me the truth. Do you have a home where you can go to?" Surprised by my energetic sound, but not defiant, he admitted that he had run away from home. He showed me how his arms were completely twisted and full of bruises. This, he told me, had done his father, and he would never return home. I was shocked, and thought feverishly how I could help the boy. Now he asked a question which I already feared. "Can I not come home with you?" The old woman heard this, mingled again. "Girl, just don't do it. If he belongs to a gang, it is dangerous for you. Even if he is alone, he will probably rob you." I ignored the woman, and actually would have liked taking him, but I had not even a couch where he could sleep, let alone my empty fridge. Besides, the old woman was not at all too wrong. It was not safe. "No, I have absolutely not the conditions to take you home with me." Helpless, I turned to the old woman. "Is there not a home here taking children?" She didn't know, then asked other people. So I got the information that only in the Centro was one near Bonfim. It was already late and impossible to go back again to the Centro. Since you cannot count on the police in Brazil, and certainly not in Bahia, which would have been rather dangerous for the boy than help, I dropped the idea to ask the police patrol for help. "Are you taking drugs?" I wanted to know of him. I felt like crying. "No, I swear I don't use drugs, and I'm not stealing. I just beg." My God, what a misery. I didn't know what to do. I just knew I could not leave the boy like this. Finally, I wrote down my phone number, gave it to him with my new phone card for public phones, I had bought only the same day. Look, tomorrow at the same time we meet here. Until then, I will have a solution for you. If you need help before, then call me. Would you want to go into a home? I could always come there and take care of you. After brief reflection, the boy nodded his head in agreement. He promised me to be here the next day. Spontaneously, I pulled the boy into my arms. I would find a home for him, no matter how. Still, I felt very bad leaving him behind, and finally exchanged phone numbers with the old woman also, and made her promise me to keep an eye on him. At home I called Percy Talva, who almost got a heart attack, because she knew me well enough to know that I pretty much took everything home with me I found on the street. After a little kitten I had found, however, then left it with someone, and Sampa, when she had already declared me as crazy, she was convinced, of course, before I could say more, that I had taken this boy home with me. Finally I managed to calm her down. No, I have not brought the boy home. She promised to listen around for me. This was not good enough for me, though, so I went to one of the churches in Itinga. What churches and pastors are useful for otherwise? To my question, I finally got a concrete answer. In Lauro de Freitas, I could find right next door to the Cartorio a children's home. Oh well, I will be there tomorrow, anyhow. But back at home, I received a call from the old woman, telling me that the boy already sold my phone card. He will use the money for drugs. You can believe me, no matter what he told you. You cannot help those children. He will not show up tomorrow either. My spirit sank to zero. My only hope was that he, at least, kept my mobile number and would call me if he needed help. Unfortunately, I never saw and heard from the boy again, and sadly came to the conclusion that the old woman had probably been right. These children were lost and not to be helped. Then perhaps one should start where it is not too late, and give those children a chance for not getting lost in the world of drugs and crime that otherwise never get a chance. It was 11, and I needed a cigarette. While Fabiano remained to continue in the queue, I was going to look for a shop where I could buy cigarettes, and met my both sisters-in-law, Katia and Patricia, who took me to the restaurant, just a 2-minute walk from the Cartorio. Lucia put a coffee in front of me, which I initially rejected on the grounds that I couldn't leave Fabiano alone sitting there. I have to keep him happy somehow. Pointing at the cigarette, Lucia asked, "Do you want to enter the register office with that? Drink your coffee and smoke your cigarette first." And she was right. Back at the registry office, I realized that the first couple was still with the registrar. Fabiano did his best to stay calm, and so did I. Together with other couples, to make things go faster, we were finally called in. The computer system was working again, but that's why the registrar was now permanently called to all other offices to establish and organize the data. So we waited. Finally he came back, turned towards us, looked at our documents, and said that I needed a confirming certificate that I was not married, and a birth certificate no older than 6 months. Also, I needed a proof of residence from my last address in Germany. These documents had to be translated and legalized. It sounded all easy, seemed as if I would not need this damned certificate of impediment for marriage. But then he suddenly asked if I had a valid visa. That was it. "You are illegally in this country. That means you are not allowed to marry. Clarify the situation with your visa first." How could I explain my situation with Fabiano on my side, who was now playing wonderfully his role as the groom in love, but knew nothing about my past? Resigned, we got up, all in vain. However, we were almost out the door as the registrar spoke to me yet again. "Come back next week. alone, then we talk in private. Either he wanted to really help me, or he wanted money for his help. Fabiano only now realized how serious my situation was. Resigned, we went back to the restaurant where we were already expected with an upcoming wedding date, but we had to disappoint everyone. I was also very disappointed of Tanya, because now I knew that she had never talked to her friend to know exactly what documents are needed. Had she done it, this lost day we could have spared. However, not only I had problems with my documents, Fabiano's birth certificate was lost, and contrary to my expectation, it was not requested by the registry office, but Fabiano would have to travel himself to his place of birth, Sao Paulo, to collect it. It reminded me of the time Josima reported that he would travel to Minas Gerais to collect his documents from there. So this was really the truth. It all seemed hopeless. Lucia asked me to stay for lunch, which I would have loved to do. She had spaghetti on the menu, but it was already late, and I had to get back to work, because I had already taken off too many days due to all this bureaucracy, and was lucky that my bosses were very tolerant, at least in these terms. My mood was back to zero. Nevertheless, I would not give up so easily. My colleagues all tried to cheer me up, and Murillo in fact found a website where birth and death certificates could be requested online. Of course, for incredibly high fees, but still cheaper than if Fabiano would have to travel to Sao Paulo and back. I sent an email to the German consulate in Recife, asking to assist me in obtaining documents. I promptly received the answer I should take care about it myself. Very funny. How? I wrote emails to the register office in Altena, as well as the registration office in Hamburg. And in fact, from the registration office in Hamburg, I received very soon response with a single certificate and proof of residence as an email attachment. Well, indeed, things seemed to be moving, but looking closely, I noticed that in the proof of residence was a big mistake. It was written that I lived from 93 to 94 in the Holstenring, instead of the fact that I had lived there until 2004, as long as I had been officially registered there. So 10 years were missing, meant that this certificate was worthless. Off I went to the second attempt. It was pleasing, however, that I also received a new birth certificate from the register office in my birth town, and even knew the registrar, a colleague of my brother-in-law, who worked in the clerk's office. After the contact to my sister and my mother had broke off again completely, after a few phone calls in Angela's house due to my relocations, and I had never received replies to my letters, this now gave me back a little hope to get contact with them again. So I wrote to the registrar, thanked him, and explained the situation to him, that I had no opportunity to call. He was the only contact person there. I found out the email address of the office in my hometown, where my brother-in-law was working, wrote to him, but neither he nor officials from the state replied. I wrote again and sent even some photos. However, first off, I concentrated and carried on with a battle about the marriage. My concentration diminished, since I was distracted once again by the male gender. Somehow, I still tried to struggle my way out of the situation with Geo, but didn't succeed so well. In my orchard appeared some candidates that were attracted by my photos. For some time now, I corresponded with Eduardo, but so far had avoided a personal meeting. I was simply not ready yet. When I received once again a new message from Eduardo, together with his photos, Fabio, my colleague, happened to see them and remarked, laughing, that this was a friend of his. I believed Fabio when he described Eduardo as a cool and nice guy. Eduardo's calls when now more often he seemed to be a little crazy, sending me at 3 o'clock in the morning a message that he was awake and thinking about me, calling me his Laura with blue eyes. Many thanks, Eduardo. When the message came on my phone, it made so much noise that I was awake and could not sleep again. According to the photos of Eduardo, he was not so much my type, although he was dark-skinned, but he had almost a girlish face, not very masculine. On the other hand, I told myself that I finally had to stop judging by appearances only. Where this was leading me to, I should have actually understood by now. However, my bus driver still occupied the first place, just behind Theo. He still hadn't called me so far, but showed me every day more than enough interest. Meanwhile, I had found out why he probably didn't call me. Despite his leather gloves he always used, as he explained to me, because of the dirty steering wheel and shift stick, I saw his wedding ring. Should it be that this smashing-looking negao was actually a faithful husband? Would be extremely unusual here in Bahia, where everyone does whatever and with whoever he wants. But there were exceptions everywhere. The day after the disaster at the registry office, I wasn't even really inside the bus yet when he shouted loud from the front to the back, so I could hear, and next to me all the passengers, what I had been doing the day before in Laura de Freitas, whether I had been for lunch at the restaurant. After I had fought my way through to the seat behind him, which was in Salvador's streets, and with those buses no easy task, and escaped this way the embarrassing glances of other passengers, who of course all had turned curious their heads, I explained to him that I had something to do in the Cattorio. I have called you when I came by the market. The bus rolled right past Lucia's restaurant. But you didn't hear me. I had to listen to in almost reproachful tone. To make things more embarrassing for me, the cobrador offered me the place he had been seated before, since it wasn't all too busy yet, opposite of the driver's seat, to help us for better conversation and to look at each other. The cobrador had long since realized the sparks between us, but this led nowhere for me. 1 week later, I took half a day off from work again to go to the Cattorio. I realized that my boss was getting a bit tired of this, because I had basically to go everywhere 2 or 3 times. But what should I do? I had no other choice. I found Mr. Sergio, chief of the registry office, immediately, and went into the offensive, showed him my parole document, argued that my social assistencia told me that I could indeed get married because I was without a visa, but at the same time could not leave the country. He looked at the document and had to admit he never had a case like this. He remarked that he would have to speak to the judge. He could not make a decision by himself, but seemed to be sympathetic, and advised me to wait until the afternoon to accompany him to the judge for clarifying the matter at the same time. I thought about it, but I knew if I did that, I would not come back to work that day. I was risking my job I unfortunately still depended on. So I told him that and why I could not wait. Asked him not to mention anything to my fiancée about this conversation, because he did not know about my past. In this he was also sympathetic, and promised to call me the next day to tell me the result of the conversation with the judge, encouraged me to continue with obtaining the necessary documents. 2 days later, the military police throughout Bahia went on strike. What this meant, I had no idea, because I never saw police around here anyway, neither in Pituaçu nor Itinga, so it made no difference to me. But from all over I was told that this would now be very dangerous, as the gangsters and bandits had free rein. The people were all tense, nervous and frightened. My boss forbade us even to take the bus to work, I'm back, and thus gave Fabio an order to pick me up from home and bring me back again with his car. All public institutions were closed, which of course included the Cattorio. The strike came and went without major incident, but the phone in the Cattorio seemed mysteriously to have stopped working. All attempts ended with the electronic message, "There is a fault in the connection." Meanwhile, it had almost become a habit that I was invited for lunch on Sundays by my mother-in-law. Fabiano was as usual busy with his computer and had little time for conversation. When I was taking coffee with Lucia, Eduardo called me. I had almost forgotten. We had agreed to meet this Sunday and go to a samba club. What a situation! Well, it was luck that Lucia did not really hear who had called me. Although we all knew that it would only be a marriage on paper, I respected Fabiano. I arrived far too early in Itapua and sat down in one of the street cafes where we supposed to meet. On the next table I noticed two men. One of them, a Moreno, I liked particularly well. Our eyes met. With this one I would have much rather talked than with Eduardo, who was now approaching. Eduardo looked very handsome, but nothing stirred inside me. Eduardo was also very funny and did interesting and intelligent conversation, but my eyes met again and again with the guy from the next table. Eduardo went across the street to buy acarajé for us. This was the opportunity to exchange phone numbers, what this man at the next table and I quickly did with the help of the waiter, so nobody would notice. Eduardo came back with the acarajé, and I smiled at him innocently. He ordered drinks for us, and then took over the bill. Since Leo, nobody had done this anymore. With this he collected plus points. His friends came to meet us, a rather nice clique, and we took the car to go to the samba club. There, too, Eduardo paid for the admission, and initially showed good manners. Well, Eduardo was intelligent, had money, could drive a car, was black, and therefore met practically all the conditions. But he was not like Joe. Shit! When did it finally end? I felt tired and sluggish, even though this was the best samba club I saw so far in Salvador, from the inside. However, I tried not to show how I was feeling, and danced to the music, even though the band did not necessarily tear me from the stool. After returning from the toilet, Eduardo waited for me at the door, pulled me close and kissed me. He could kiss very good, but still it stirred nothing in me. We sat in the comfort zone of the club, with elegant chairs, sofas and tables, and a giant TV where some people watched a football match. Eduardo was getting clear now. "I want to sleep with you, tonight." Although I had no more sex after Geo, I refused rigorously. It didn't have to be necessarily Eduardo, at least not yet. I didn't want to be fooled again and feel so crappy afterwards, as I still felt. Give me a little time. Today I'm tired and have to work tomorrow early. "I give you a full body massage. Then you feel much better," he tried to convince me. I didn't need a massage. I needed something else. Eduardo tried, politely as he was, to hide his disappointment. But we hadn't much to say to us anymore. Maybe, after all, something could have happened between us if Eduardo would have taken me alone to the bus stop, and if he would have given me the opportunity to explain that I needed time. But he took two friends in the car, so we were given no opportunity to speak. The only thing he said when I got out, "Call me and let me know when you're home." Was this a peace offer? No, probably only politeness, because when I did, he switched off his phone without any comment. I almost had to laugh. The Baianos were, in my eyes, all kind of sick in the head. Monday he received from me a spicy email, and after work I called the man from the other table. Andre appeared very likable on the phone. We arranged to meet the coming Saturday. However, when I received a call of him on Tuesday, and he asked me if we could not meet Saturday, I wondered whether Andre was suffering from amnesia. "We have already arranged yesterday to meet on Saturday," I carefully pointed out to our telephone conversation of the day before. 2 minutes after the call, I learned that Andre was not suffering from amnesia. My caller phoned again and confessed, "You know I'm not Andre, I'm Rogerio, the second man at the table. I also liked you very much, and I thought I'd just have a try, but please don't tell Andre." My goodness, were those guys all crazy in Salvador? I lay on my bed and could not stop laughing. I used my idle time once again at work and checked my ads. I had placed on the internet to see if more responses for my translation offers had come in. By chance I noticed another ad I had placed some time ago, I already forgot. Quem gosta de Lola, com olhos azuis? Who likes a blonde with blue eyes? I almost fell off the chair in shock at the high number of replies. Of course, not all of them were serious, and the silly ones immediately deleted. Then I sorted out the ones of men writing they were not from Salvador. What should I do with a guy from Sao Paulo or Minas Gerais? Others I copied the email addresses into the Orkut and therefore could already see some of the photos. This way I came across Vinicius. His way of writing impressed me. He seemed to be much different than all the others, which were all alike somehow. Vinicius left a very intelligent but loving impression on me. Since I still had to translate my text and was busy with work for the hotel, I couldn't copy his email into the Orkut, thus didn't know what he looked like. At first I was on my date on Saturday with Andre, who was a really nice guy, but again it was the same as with Rafael, Eduardo, and the other potential successors of Leo and Geo. It was no use. Andre was on closer inspection not my type. Additionally, he was poor with a minimum salary and 2 or more dependent children. He seemed to have a good heart and character, but so what? If he would have at least looked like Joe, it would not even have bothered me if he had been unemployed. Andre was thin as a skeleton, which I hadn't noticed the first time. I liked him, but more was not possible. Another weekend I spent alone with Sampa, but something was different. I no longer thought of Geo, but instead tried to imagine how Vinicius looked like and how he was. Sunday he actually called me. By his soft and sexy voice I was already lost, and I suddenly could not care less how Vinicius looked like. But after I saw his photos in the Orkut, I was blown away. What a man! Interested, I read through all of the details in his Orkut and learned, hooray, he was not one of those crazy baianos, but had moved here from Rio de Janeiro. That could only go well. However, he was only 25 years old. I had given my personal ad with my age, so he would know what he was doing. He sent me lovely messages with the beginning, meu amor, and suddenly my mood was back on top. I did my work cheerful, joked and laughed with my colleagues, who always had some funny speeches concerning me. Fabio was recently trying to learn German and was also quite talented. Only the beginning was always a bit difficult whenever he wanted to learn a new word. The others followed, and everyone was trying to pronounce some German word, which always caused great laughter. Some words, however, remained in our everyday vocabulary, like Mittagessen, lunch in German. No one said any more, vamos almorzar. Instead, it was generally said, vamos Mittagessen. Although the friendship between me and Tanya was disturbed because I just didn't like to come to her street, she was not willing to visit me. Her mother offered me an almost brand new television for 250 reais. For me it was much to pay at once. I couldn't meet ends with my money as it was, but I couldn't explain why I always spent so much money because I hardly went out. Bought me new clothes. Cut. Still, I got neither backwards nor forwards. She agreed that I paid the TV in 2 monthly installments. On the way to Tanya's mother, I came by the restaurant where Leo worked, and he promptly stopped me after spotting me. To me, it didn't matter anymore. It was over, finally. For Leo, I had no more feelings. In a very clumsy way, he started a conversation with me, asked how Sampa was. Too late. He asked me again to give him lessons in computer science, to which I replied that I had to think about it, and left him standing where he was. When I confessed to Vinicius that I fell in love already with his voice, he replied, "Wait until you get to know the rest." Professionally, he was responsible for the entire online network in the recently opened shopping center Paralela, and worked until late in the evening. Therefore, it initially didn't look too well for a meeting, but he called and wrote me every day now. I looked at his photos in the Orkut. Jealous, I read the comments from other female fans on the Orkut. But on Thursday it seemed very much as we would meet, because Vinicius was off by 6 o'clock in the evening. In the afternoon he called me, however, and asked if I had already read his message. "What message?" I asked, in amazement. As always, I felt completely overwhelmed by his soft voice as he continued, "Meu amor, I have been transferred until the weekend to the shopping center Salvador. An emergency. I have service up to 10 o'clock. Unfortunately, we cannot see us." At first I suspected again some excuse, because my confidence was pretty much shattered. My mood sank, but he suggested, "If there is a way for you to come to the shopping Salvador, I'll take some time off. Might be only an hour or so, but we can at least see us in person at last." Of course I could. In the Orkut I saw that he had placed the message in the middle of my front page. "Meu amor, unfortunately we cannot see us today. Emergency in the shopping Salvador. I'm very sorry. Kisses." On one hand, I was very proud because all the others, even his female fans, could see this with his photograph beside it. On the other hand, I complained half-jokingly, "Oh, great Vinicius, you've killed my chances with other guys at once." In the shopping Salvador, I had just asked my way to the correct entrance when he called me and wanted to know where I was. Shortly thereafter, Vinicius stood before me, a dream of a man. We greeted us with a kiss on the cheek, sat on a bench. He asked me, a little embarrassed at first, how I thought about him now. I made no secret of the fact that I liked him very much. He commented, "You are a very beautiful woman." Our chemistry and everything seemed to be perfect. We sat very close together so that our bodies touched, and it felt good. However, I did not want any more illusions and false hopes. "Vinicius, did you see my age in my ad and in the Orkut? I'm quite a bit older than you. If you are disturbed with it, then say it now." Of course he had not. Said that it did not bother him and wanted to get to know me better in any case. However, suddenly he could not stay as planned 1 hour, but had to go back to work after half an hour. Parting, he embraced me very tenderly, breathed a kiss on my cheek. This time, everything stirred inside me. He promised to call me later in the night. Happy and sure that I had finally found the right man with whom I could forget all the disappointments from before, I was on my way home. After a long time, I went to see Tanya and Matthew. Tanya was not very talkative, but Matthew noticed the change on me. "You're so radiant tonight. Has anything happened?" Then I could no longer keep the news to myself and confessed that I was in love. Tanya reacted not necessarily interested, contrary to Marcio, who was happy for me and wanted to know who the lucky one was. Contrary to his promise, Vinicius called me either that evening or the next day. How often had I been through this already? Excessively disappointed, I asked him via email to explain why he suddenly changed his mind, and if it was the age difference, why he did not mention this at our meeting. I received a reply 2 days later, which turned out to be very poorly. I don't think we fit together. Let us remain friends. Again, I had to crack hard on it. I could not and did not want to understand how these Bahian men mutated from one day to another from passionate men who used phrases like meo amor, minha linda, etc., into cold-hearted, irreverent assholes. By the end of the week I was down, went depressed as I was on Saturday to Italva, who was in the process of restructuring her dressmakers. I tried not to show my sadness. Italva had no time anyway, and could have long since not followed any more with whom I was together, with or rather say not together.